Hello, everybody. My name is Dax Bayo. I am the Cuban American Bar Association president in the year 2021. I have the distinct honor and privilege of bestowing the recognition of Florida Jurist Hispanic Excellence to the Honorable Judge Gina Beovides of the 11th Judicial Circuit of Florida. Judge Beovides has been a judge for some time, and welcome, Your Honor.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for selecting me. And quite frankly, I look at the others and the other judges I share this award with and this recognition, and it's truly humbling to be a part of this. So thank you to CABA and to all the organizations that are taking part of this. And Braulio, thank you so much for putting this together.
A special thanks to Braulio and the Broward County Hispanic Bar Association. Your Honor, we want to give the folks an opportunity to get to know who Judge Beovides is. Growing up as a Hispanic female in the South Florida area, wanted to talk about what your background is like, both national and cultural, and what growing up in South Florida was like.
Well, happy to do so. So I was born in Hialeah Hospital. So even though I am technically born in the United States and I am American, that's about as Cuban as you can possibly get, right? To be born in the city of Hialeah. And then I was raised, and my family lived in Little Havana. So I always say born in Hialeah, raised in Little Havana, went to high school in Westchester, which are all very Hispanic, very Cuban communities in the city of Miami and Miami-Dade, I should say city of Miami and Miami-Dade County. And on my end, I was born to Cuban parents. My upbringing, I would say, was somewhat unique when you compare it to other people who were born and raised in Miami. The school that I went to was called Jose Marti School, it's still there. And aside from the fact that it's named after the poet, a Cuban poet, and most people know who Jose Marti is, but he was also a revolutionist of the Spanish war that Cuba had for Cuba's independence. It was also owned by my grandfather. The school was owned by my grandfather, is now managed by my godmother and my mother. So I essentially went to school around my family, and I was there from the day I was born, probably the day after I was born, through 8th grade. And so my grandfather taught me mathematics, aside from other teachers. My grandmother was my Spanish teacher. My godmother was my English teacher. My cousin was my literature teacher. And so that was definitely a unique upbringing. And what I would say was the culture of the school was equally unique. I went to a school where the first Friday of every month, we did these things called actos cívicos, or civic acts. And that was at first Friday of every month, the whole school would line up, and you would obviously say the Pledge of Allegiance, you would sing the American national anthem, but you would also do the Cuban national anthem. So every student in the school knew exactly what the Cuban national anthem was. Just as we would read stories from Three Little Pigs, we knew, and we would read La Edad de Oro from Jose Marti. So it was equally important to understand not just who we were as Americans, but most of the kids in that school had either a Hispanic background or Cuban background, and it was equally important as part of our education that we preserved and maintained our cultural background. And that was the my basic upbringing. And I mean, we went to protest when we were in that school. When I remember when in the early 90s, when the Brothers to the Rescue plane was shot down, the school, everyone from our school went to the Orange Bowl Stadium there to protest that. And, there was a day one time in Miami, did a stoppage of work to protest some political protest involving companies handling businesses with Cuba. And everyone in the school said, we're going to do a walkout too. Like, the students were part of this. So government was important to us. Civics was important to us. And Constitution was something that every kid in that school really had a unique knowledge and perspective, that even though they weren't challenges that we necessarily faced because of our age, we certainly were very well aware of what our parents and grandparents had gone through in order for us to receive the freedoms that we received in this country.
That's great. I didn't know your Jose Marti school story. Thank you for sharing that. Having grown up as a Hispanic in South Florida, maybe a little easier than other places, but did you face any challenges throughout the years? And is there anything about your upbringing that you thought maybe helped you get to where you're at today?
Yeah, me personally, I certainly, when I sit here and I look at some of the adversity that some of my colleagues throughout the state have gone through, or even my colleagues in the 11th Circuit. And I was fortunate enough not to have undergone those challenges and adversities or had faced certain levels of discrimination. But I owe that completely to so many people who have paved a way to improve those barriers, reduce those barriers, in my instance, completely eliminate any of those barriers in order for me to become a judge. And I recognize, you're speaking as the current president of the Cuban American Bar Association, and they took a big role. It was voluntary bar organizations such as the Cuban American Bar Association, who and at the time also SALAD, and we talk about one of the founding members of the Cuban American Bar Association, who recently passed, Osvaldo Soto, who made it his mission to reduce those barriers and to say, not only are we here, not only do we deserve equal participation in every aspect of the political process, including the judiciary. So I recognize that, and certainly while things have been not difficult for me, all that it takes is to have a meeting. And then, I was mentioning this a little while ago with Braulio, all I have to do is have a conversation with one of the past presidents of the Cuban American Bar Association to realize it wasn't so long ago where we were facing these challenges, where it would be difficult for not just as a Cuban American, but, at the age, I became a judge at the age of 33 and a woman to become a judge. So I recognize that with the opportunity that I've been given, I hold myself to a very high standard to succeed, because I owe it to so many who have made this possible for me.
Yeah, I agree. And Osvaldo certainly held a torch and paved the way for a lot of folks in this circuit and in this state. And so there's the next set of questions that I was going to ask you, but you've already touched on, so I'll deviate a little bit. Basically about, have we gotten better at having diversity on the bench? And it sounds like we have. My question that I'll ask is, are we there yet? Do we have a system in place that provides for the utmost diversity on the bench, or do we still have a little bit ways to go, or a lot?
Well, I think anytime that you're satisfied with the status quo is an opportunity to revisit that situation, because there's always room for improvement. I look at the 11th Judicial Circuit, and certainly if you were to take a photograph of the 123 of us, it would look very different than it did go back. Don't have to go back that far, but I've been practicing as an attorney now 16 years. I've been a licensed attorney in the state of Florida, and I'm sure if you took a picture of what the judiciary looked like 16 years ago, it would be very different than what it looked like today. And that's good. Diversity is great for a lot of reasons. And we talk about cultural diversity, we talk about diversity of age, ethnicity, race, gender, and we talk about ethnicity in terms of your area of practice. One of the things as a judge, and Dax, you'll know this from your jury trials, is we ask jurors and we tell jurors that when they come into court and they're being selected, they all come with their backgrounds and personal experiences. And you don't leave that necessarily, you bring that with you. And then the question is, can you still apply the law? Can you follow the law and apply it to the facts of the case? Well, the same goes for judges. Everyone brings their own personal backgrounds and experiences, and they're a valuable asset. It helps us communicate with the community that we represent. It helps us when we give our rulings, when we give an explanation, we can do it in a way where we know exactly who that person is, what their trials are, what their challenges are, what their life looks like, because we are members of that community. So to the extent that we diversify the bench so that judges reflect the community that they live in, that's what we all should strive to do.
Very well said. What motivated you to become a judge, and what motivates you to continue to be a judge?
Right. So I got to tell you, the motivation certainly has, I wouldn't say changed, but certainly has evolved. Well, I guess changes and evolved is the same thing, but I would say more things have been added to it. So I would start off by saying it started in law school. We're a very innocent concept. As a law student, you're sent to read hundreds of pages a day, filled with all kinds of intricacies and opinions that are very difficult to decipher. And I always vowed that I was going to be a judge one day, if for nothing else, to write simple rulings and simple opinions with simple reasoning so that every single person can understand exactly why it is you're ruling the way you're ruling. And that was something that I said, you know what, one of these days, some law student is going to thank me. because of the way that I write. And I still carry that with this day. I'm very mindful of that when I write. And then once I started practicing law, I got very lucky that I was surrounded by excellent mentors who happened to be judges and who paved the way for me and inspired me to want to be part of that process. Because here's the beauty, and I should say my background is I worked prior to becoming a judge. I worked 10 years at a Dade Legal Aid representing victims of domestic violence. And those were people that lived in Miami-Dade County that otherwise didn't have the ability to hire private attorneys, so they would come see me. And they came from all walks of life, all backgrounds, and a lot of different minority groups. And there was always a sense of apprehension, depending on what country they came from, that our system of government would somehow be unfair because they didn't have the same resources as the other person, because they either didn't have money or because in the countries that they're from, judges are perceived to be bought. And there's a way to get to them. And it was always great for me to show that that's not the way it works here. And I can, I've been from so many great judges who now I have the privilege of calling my colleagues, that I got to show my clients, you're going to get your fair day in court. You're going to get your day heard. So to the extent that I then had enough knowledge where I felt I could do that, I can deliver that sense of not just justice under the law, but also that perceived justice, which is, it's just as important for the people that come in front of it. They walked in and out, and even though they may not be happy with the result of the case, if they got a fair shake and I gave them that, then I'm doing my part of what our government demands of us, of what our Constitution asks us to do. And for me to go back to my upbringing, if you're from Miami and you have Cuban parents and you know very well that the Constitution is more than just a piece of paper, it's more than just a Bill of Rights. It's the genius of our system of checks and balances that separate us from so many countries that have a constitution, but it's completely pointless without that system of checks and balances. So my adherence and my respect to the rule of law and the fidelity of that constitution is the best way that I can go ahead and not just say thank you to my parents, thank you to my grandparents, but to all those who have died to try to get me here who died to try to get us into this country, who still go through certain struggles and live in totalitarian regimes, and to all those who have made the sacrifice for me to have this opportunity that now I get to give back.
God bless America. What since becoming a judge, has anything changed since you first became a judge until this point?
Well, so many things have changed, but can you be a bit more specific?
Yeah, just, I guess with respect to the fact that you are a Hispanic judge, have you found that you maybe have become more accepted by either your peers or the bench over the time that you've been a judge, or has it remained the same?
For me, it was a very welcoming experience. And I hope that the other 122 of us can say the same thing, at least, definitely those that have gotten to the bench recently. But I have been welcomed. I've been welcomed. Like I said, I had mentors before I became a judge. I certainly seek to emulate the former Chief Judge, Judge Bertie Soto, who's Osvaldo Soto's daughter. And I seek to copy her in so many ways. And someone just turned around and our new Chief Judge, Judge Safey, said in her passing of the gavel last Friday that she constantly asked herself, what would Bertie do? And that's a common theme that those of us in the 11th Circuit has. And I often ask myself that question, but it was not just Judge Soto who would welcome me. It's in every category, every administrative judge, associate administrative judge, a judge who's been there for a day and a judge who's been there for 30 years. We are as good as our newest judge and as good as our worst judge because we are part of a system. So it is incumbent upon all of us to not just welcome judges, welcome their backgrounds, welcome their experiences, and then help them become the best they can possibly be, because you want a good judge, right? It translates well because the parties that come in front of you want to go before a good judge. So I think we all, when I say we, I mean, I think every judge in the state has an obligation to reach out to each other and with a sense of collegiality and assist each other to, help a fair and efficient administration of justice.
Yeah, lift each other up. I agree. Have you experienced or witnessed discrimination against minorities in your lifetime? And this can include, going back to your childhood or your time during at date legal aid. And if so, what were your takeaways from those experiences? Have you learned anything from those experiences?
Me personally, I've been fortunate. I certainly haven't felt it. Perhaps if I were to sit down and really think about it, maybe at some point I might have been treated differently. Certainly, I had situations where, not so much in grade school, definitely, or high school, because again, predominantly most people I went to high school with looked like me, sounded like me. But once I got to the university or in law school and graduate school, it wasn't so much of discrimination, but it was, you sound funny. Where are you from? Where's your accent from? That's not discrimination per se. That's just acknowledging that someone is different than someone else. And it's what you come from that. How do we explain? And sometimes a lot of things have to do with the unknown and the fear of the unknown, and just something is different, which is why I love programs like this and recognizing people across the state, because we get to know each other. One of the beauties that I don't think people realize about becoming a judge is that you get to go to statewide conferences and you get to become friends with people who are serving in Leon County, with people in Putnam County. And you get to meet these individuals and you get to know their pathways, their struggles, their challenges, their ups, their downs, because who knows the job and the stresses of that job better than another judge that's going through it. But you also get to know, how do they do it? How does a judge in a small county get to, address cases in a way that's different from a judge in a large or extra large county like Miami-Dade? So, I try to reach out to them. I can tell you, I know pretty much everyone else that's been nominated and has receiving an award as a result of this event. I've had the beauty to spend time with them in conferences, and I've learned from them the same way that I hope they've learned from me too. It's a wonderful experience.
It's funny you say that, we sound different to some folks. Miami is its own dialect. It has its own dialect. And even I think within Miami, there are sub dialects, right? You've got your Kendall dialect, you got your Hialeah dialect. But it's
certainly speaking a rhythm.
Yeah, it's a unique thing about South Floridians. So just a couple more questions, more geared towards the younger lawyers who want to become a judge and aspire to kind of follow in your footsteps. Aside from a good education, a strong work ethic, what do you believe are the essential qualities that are important for a judge to have, and something that someone should work on to make sure that if they want to be a judge, they're putting their best foot forward?
Well, those two qualities are pretty important, right? You want a judge who's competent and you want a judge who has a strong work ethic. What I would put up there once more is judicial integrity. This job, if you're feeling, and a judicial mentor of mine, Judge Frank Shepard, told me this, and this has actually been repeated several times by several judges who I hold in high regard. If you feel happy with every ruling you're giving, you may be doing it wrong. This job requires fidelity to the law, and that sometimes yields to unpopular results. And days where you understand that your ruling, if you're faithful to the law, is going to have some harsh consequences for someone, and you're certainly not happy about it. You're not sleeping well at night, so to speak. It does weigh on you. But I think, for lawyers that come in front of the judge, judicial integrity is a huge quality to have, to realize that that judge is not necessarily trying to reach a desired outcome, but instead is trying to follow a process, an analysis, and a methodology. And more importantly, they're being consistent in their approach to the case, because what consistency does is predictability. And when litigants, parties, lawyers can predict outcomes based on how consistent that judge is, you're doing it right. For me, I love to hear that I'm nice, that I'm very nice, that perhaps I'm funny, lighthearted. But one of the highest compliment I think someone can give me is she was fair, especially if it's coming from someone who I ruled against. And because that's an important, if not the most important quality that this job demands of us.
You've alluded to this a few times, and I know some of your mentors, and I am a firm believer in strong mentee-mentor relationships. Can you can you tell us how important, and maybe speak to the younger lawyers, how important to you as developing strong mentor-mentee relationships with your mentors, and also kind of piggyback on that, do you have any mentees, and kind of explain to them why it's important in your own words?
It's vital. I mean, in terms of the level of importance, it's extremely vital. And I've had mentors throughout my life. I've had when as a child, whether, sometimes it's your family, sometimes it's a teacher, but I've certainly had people that have always served as role models along the way, guiding me because, there's a saying in Spanish, más sabe el diablo por viejo que por diablo, which is the devil knows more because of age than for being the devil. But the point is that there is wisdom with age. And people who have seen things and done things and experienced things have something to offer you, to show you a way of doing it, that no matter how young and how great you think you are, brilliant or new idea you may have, run it by someone who may have already been there and done that and see what they have to say on the matter. And for me, I say it takes a village. I certainly had, I speak of Judge Soto so much because she's someone who we want to emulate both professionally and personally. And, but Dax, I was very fortunate to have served on the Cuban American Bar Association on the board for 5 years. And that you and I both got on the board at the same time. And we had some wonderful, and still do have some wonderful mentors in terms of those past presidents that we can go to for that insight, that we can go and ask for help in trying times. And so I strongly suggest any attorney, it doesn't even matter, by the way, whether you've been practicing for a day or you've been practicing for 20 years, we all need someone that we can bounce things off of and that we trust, that are guiding us in the right direction. And again, I'm a big believer of paying it forward, right? I certainly had people that were willing to give me their time. I look at Judge Carol Kelly, Judge Bloom. So to the extent that I have the opportunity to mentor anyone, I'm more than happy to do it. One of the greatest points of satisfaction I've had is that my former judicial assistant is now a first-year law student. And, she didn't even have the idea of going to law school until she worked for me and was inspired by, I don't want to get credit. It's not that she was inspired by me, but she inspired what she saw out of the profession. She was inspired by the lawyers who appeared in front of us. She was inspired to see what a lawyer can do. This is a beautiful profession. To do and exercise it in such a fashion, you're going to need to surround yourself with good mentors.
Indeed. Well said, Your Honor. Thank you so very much for sharing your journey with us. It's fascinating. Incredibly honored to have been a part of this, and want to thank again the Broward County Hispanic Bar Association for including CABA in this project, and looking forward to hopefully seeing everybody in person in the very near future. You too.
I hope so too.